Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Troubled Podcast for survivors by survivors. Today, I am so excited. Both me and Miranda are very excited. We can't contain our excitement.
There'll be lots of giggles.
There will be. We have an excellent expert survivor and advocate in the industry on today. Her name is Liz Ianelli. She is a psychotherapist, a traumatologist, a licensed clinical social worker, mental health police instructor. She's been featured on The Doctors on CBS talking about this very subject. She's been in the New York Times, featured in the International Cultic Society Association. Please welcome Liz Ianelli to the podcast.
Here I am.
Yay!
It's me. It's only me.
Is. Thank you so much, Liz. Miranda.
No problem.
Who wants?
Yes. Yeah. No. I want to be part of this intro too.
Yes.
So Liz, not only obviously does she have like a plethora of badges to prove like how educated and how knowledgeable she is on this subject, and apparently all subjects pertaining to the psyche and how we interact individually and as groups. But Liz is also a survivor from the family school and a personal support system for Meredith and myself. After coming out with the New York Times cover article, Liz was she's that call if you can't drive straight. And so we are so grateful to have her on the podcast. This is probably the most important guest we've had so far. So thank you, Liz.
Wow. That was a good intro. I like that.
Good. Not too offensive to your humility. So
I'm uncomfortable. It gets weird, but it's me. It's just me. Like, forget everything they just said. It's just me.
It's just me.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me on. And I think to get right to the punch, as usual for me, the Child Victims Act. Basically, the Child Victims Act allows survivors of child abuse who were unable to file a civil lawsuit under the old law, to have a 1-year look back period. So in January of 2019, the bill passed. 6 months later, August 14th was kind of opening day for being able to actually file your case. The Child Victims Act unfortunately, does not pertain to strictly physical or emotional or spiritual or mental abuse. The Child Victims Act is strictly for sexual abuse that was a result of negligence. So what does that mean for us, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll take the family for an example. I filed a case. I was the first in New York State to file under the Child Victims Act and the first to file from the family. On August 14th at 4:28 p.m., my case was entered into e-courts. And so what that means is that we have 1 year. So from August 14th, 2019 until August 14th of 2020, this is the only year of a look back that you have been granted to come forward and file a lawsuit against an institution or individual that sexually assaulted and abused you.
Yeah.
And so at the moment, there are 6 cases filed against the family school and a variety of different mixtures of who the defendants that are named. Some are personal. All of them name Education Plus Corporation. There's a lot of confusion because people and survivors say, oh, my program's closed, or that abuse was so long ago, or where's the money, or like, how does this work? How it works is that Education Plus is still incorporated. Therefore, they had insurance policies that were in place during the time of your stay. So the coverage that may be in place for me when I was there in the 90s may have been a different policy or sold or underwritten by a different company with different coverage when you were there at a different time. So it really is individualized based on what the research will show when they do a search of who the insurance carrier was at that time.
And Education Plus is one of these consultants that recruits, they work with parents and they're like...
Nope. So picture the family school kind of like on the ground as a structure, and their quote business or place of business in New York State, because they were monetized, is named Education Plus Corporation.
Oh, wow.
So that's like the holding company for the family school.
I see.
So it's whatever insurance policies that Education Plus Corporation, to be able to operate as a business, whatever coverage they had for the type of quote business that they were running, that those are the policies that determine what your coverage is potentially. Is it an automatic check, please? Absolutely not. Unfortunately, you can't just walk in and collect your money. You do have to file. There's one of two ways it goes. Three. The case gets dismissed for some odd reason. You settle outside of court with a non-disclosure, or you take it to trial.
Question before you go any further.
Yes.
I just want to make people understand. This is the Child Victims Act is only in the state of New York, correct?
Correct. Currently, there are other states that have better laws and age brackets for when you can file. It's interesting because, it's been recognized that it's very difficult for survivors of child sexual abuse to come forward, even to terms with the trauma, until many, many, many years later. So realizing that, other states have different rules that apply, but for New York State, they finally recognized that we may not have been fully aware to be able to, or need to, or want to come forward at the time. The old law was that you had 1 to 5 years from the time that you turned 18. So I would have had to have had my head on straight at 22, 23 to decide to go see a lawyer when I was still traumatized by what I had already been through, to try and pursue a case for a school that was still open. So I would have felt vulnerable, like that they could still come at me. And I think, for me, leading up to filing this case, for me personally, it was I had 6 months to struggle with what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So if you were in New York, if you were at the Family, or another program in New York was Freedom Village, or any other programs that I may have missed, New York is not highly popularized with these types of programs like the Family School. So demographically, Utah is like heavy-handed, and Montana versus New York, the ratio is different. So for New York, if you were a part or at any institution, where you were sexually abused and assaulted, and I'll go down what that qualifies for in a minute, you have until August 14th to step forward.
Is it August or April?
August. If you have or have not heard of the Child Victims Act, if you hear nothing, hear me now. It's a time-sensitive issue. And another option that I did not choose to invoke my right, but under the Child Victims Act, I could have invoked the Jane Doe Act, meaning I could have remained anonymous or used a pseudonym if I had wanted to, because we're treated as a child.
Right.
So in that regard, I chose to use my name, and it's not I'll ask you, why do you think I used my name?
I think you used your name to show other people that there's no reason to be, I'm sure there are reasons, but they don't have to be afraid anymore.
Yeah, they don't have to hide in the shadows. We can come out and...
Right. Yeah, a lot of people think that I use my name as like a big FU, like, hey, it's me filing, it totally wasn't. It wasn't out of vengeance. It was simply, look, I want to use my name. So maybe if people say like, oh, well, if Liz Ianelli can do it, maybe I can do it. And that's why. And it also,
people don't realize you're a survivor. I feel like you've been advocating for us. I think some people forget, like, oh, that's right, she's a survivor of the troubled teen industry too, like me.
Right.
I don't know. That's hard because you're Survivor 993 all over the internet.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Even my license plate says it. So I guess it's everywhere.
That would have been the FU to the family if you'd sued them as Survivor 993.
You know what? I thought about it, but then it's still identifying. It's like, what's the point? They know who I am. And I'm fine with that. So you can remain anonymous as well and be fully protected. So there are a lot of options. I think and I wondered to myself, like, let's face it, sexual abuse at the Family was rampant in all different ways. And so, in trying to understand what that means, in going forward, it feels like you're like volunteering for a table topic, or volunteering to be told that you're lying and manipulating, and that you're going to subject yourself to the same types of behaviors from strangers that are going to try to attack your story, your credibility, and that's like a big fear. But it's not as realistic as people, I guess, give weight to that. You know, at the family, we were the villains. Okay. Like, we were the ones that were in the hot seat. But in real life, if you were sexually abused, you're the victim. And that's where I think we get confused,
Yeah.
and with being the victim, it's not like, oh, you know, you play the victim so well, you carry your own body chalk with you. It's not like that. It's that you are acknowledging that something happened to you under forcible coercion, meaning we did not have a choice, based on that we were dependent on food and water and shelter and clothing and exile or no exile, or very basic, the hierarchy of needs, because we were fully dependent and in fear of physical retaliation or harm. We didn't have an option to say no. It's very similar to the laws about inmates. An inmate can voluntarily have sex with a correctional officer, but that correctional officer will still be charged with rape because the inmate is presumed to have no ability to give consent because of the shift in power. It's the same principle that's applied to when there's an institution where we were, where the power structure was extremely imbalanced. So there's a lot of confusion. And here's another mind-blowing fact. If you went to the family, and I can speak for this program, if you went to the family and you were sexually assaulted by another student, you also can file a lawsuit for sexual assault, because the family was negligent in providing proper supervision. They were negligent in leaving us alone, isolated in dorms at night with no adult. I mean, like, I say that loosely, like as if they protected us, but that, there was no one there, who's watching the kids. Nobody. We did what we did on our own time, and so in that regard, you could have been abused by another student, or a quote senior member, or a new it doesn't matter. But in my case, I was sexually assaulted by a staff member. But in other cases, there's some other stuff where they were assaulted by other students. Okay. So it doesn't have to be, it doesn't look like what you think it looks like.
What we wanted to know is, in order to be able to utilize this Child Victims Act up until August, did the situation have to take place in New York State?
Yes. So you had to, it's only applicable to sexual abuse that occurred in New York State, where the Child Victims Act is for if you are currently outside of the statute of limitations. That's how you get the 1-year look back to file your case. You do not have to live in New York State any longer. You could live in North Carolina, Texas, California, Alaska. You could live internationally, and you can still file a case within New York, as long as the sexual abuse, in terms of it being negligent, occurred in New York State. And just another point I wanted to make is that the media, and when this all came forward, really sensationalized 2 different areas of where they believed all of this sexual abuse occurred: the Boy Scouts and the Roman Catholic Church. You missed one. You forgot a big category, which is the troubled teen industry survivors, or survivors of institutions. It's kind of like, we exist, and we're right here, up front and center. We were on the cover of the New York Times. I mean, like, let's face it. So they forgot a massive category, and we, for ourselves, should make sure that we are equally represented, that we're not part of either of these massive entities. We're part of a different industry that's been very not represented or underrepresented,
Yeah, absolutely. And earlier you said that you would lay out what is going to constitute as sexual abuse with this period.
Right. So in terms of filing a civil suit, okay, and again, I am not a lawyer and this list is not all inclusive, but I'm just trying to put it out there because sometimes as survivors of abuse as children, it was so normalized for us that we may not realize what happened to us was actually wrong, or we may have mixed feelings about it. Examples, just a few, definitely sodomy, rape, being forced to give or receive oral sex, being forced or asked to touch or be touched in a sexual manner. If you were taken out of state and sexually abused, that's something that you really, I would beg you to please, for reasons that I can't disclose, but I'll help you, bring to my immediate attention. If you were abused, taken across state lines with the intent to be sexually abused and assaulted, being groped, and I'd gone over, could have been by a staff member or by a student. Um, those are the kind of things that are successful in civil litigation in terms of being able to fully explain, and defend the actions that you're taking.
Okay. And so if this rings true to someone, if someone's hearing this and they're like, actually, I hadn't thought about it that way, but yes, this was sexual abuse. Yes, it did happen in New York State. What are their next steps?
Their next step is to very, very carefully think about it, and kind of be stable enough to, really self-evaluate where they're at. And then they have to do their homework and find a legitimate law firm that is not advertising on Facebook or, Instagram, wherever. There are some law firms. I'm happy to share those names. If someone wants to reach out to me personally and confidentially, that's fine. I do know of a few law firms that have handled cases against the troubled teen industry. So they're very versed in the manipulation and the tactics, the language, the punishments. Starting over ground zero with an attorney is difficult. So basically, you can get in touch with me. I don't work for any of these attorneys. I don't get any kickbacks. I mean, I'm not involved in that way. I'm just aware of who or what firms have had experience with the troubled teen industry. So I'm happy to help that way.
What I wanted to say too was like we can definitely get in touch with you if anyone
Sure.
wants to come forward. Also, I did want you, because we did speak a little bit before about I guess debunking this whole thing, because there's some shit going on with your case. I don't know if you can talk about that.
I could talk a little bit about it
Yeah.
in general terms. And let me, before I say any of it, the insurance companies, it's not the family school attorney that I'm up against. It is the insurance company's attorney that I'm up against.
I see.
So their job, these lawyers hired by insurance companies, their job is to not pay out too much money. Like their job is to kind of guard the gate. So of course they're going to come forward with very egregious and very outrageous standard defenses in these kinds of cases, hoping that one sticks. So they basically will throw the kitchen sink at the plaintiff, being me, hoping that one of their defenses kind of makes it through, which is difficult. So one of them, and many of them are standard. So I don't want anyone to hear this and be like, oh my God, I'm not doing this. Like, it's not a table topic. We'll get to that in the end. We're not under investigation. Okay. We're coming forward with what happened to us, which is our truth. And we have to remember that. One of the things they came with, it's called the doctrine of latches, meaning that too much time has passed. There's probably not any evidence left. I took my time, meaning I was like a slug. So why now? That was one of them. And that was a hard one, just that alone to take. But also it was implied that because I was 15 at the time, that it potentially could have been consensual. because I have a high IQ and because of all these other things. And, you know, a 15-year-old is not a 5-year-old, basically. So they were kind
Wow.
of, yeah, wow. But you know what? At first I like was really, like very upset. I mean, I was crying and just like felt like so small when I read these things. But from talking, you know, with different colleagues and in my circle, these are very standard responses, okay? Because that insurance company lawyer doesn't care about me at all, doesn't understand the family, doesn't understand the industry, doesn't know anything about us or what we went through. So for them, they're looking at it, okay, you know, my case, you know, I was sodomized and sexually assaulted and reported it, and nothing happened, and I was punished for it, and that's how I ended up in the blanket for 8 days, to silence me. So, you know, they don't know anything about that part. They are very tangential and very cold in their responses. So my advice to anyone is it's not personal. Like, it's not about you. It's about money.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, was I pissed off that they said I could have consented? Yeah. I went through, I had a moment. Okay. Like I had I see white light moment, and then it was sadness. And then it was, all right, well, back to business as usual. This is them and this is me, and I'm telling the truth and they don't know it yet. So that's kind of how I had to look at it.
Wow.
Boom.
Yeah, that's like a hard pill for me to swallow. Because it's just, you know, none of us were there by our consent. Even just being there. So
Right. And we were all, we were what's considered a vulnerable population. Not only were we physically isolated, but we were mentally isolated, and we were kept within this invisible fence of fear. So we have to really check ourselves and remind that we're not wearing shock collars anymore. You know, we're adults now, and we know our truth, and they're going to have to answer. A lot of people also ask me, is anyone going to jail? This is a civil case, not a criminal case. The Child Victims Act deals with civil litigation, not criminal. So we are outside the statute of our limitations for criminal charges to be filed and for that prosecution. But for a civil litigation, we are well within our window until August 14th of 2020. And don't wait till the 13th to find your lawyer, okay? If you're going to do anything, you want to start the process now, because it's not a quick phone call. There's a lot of steps involved in getting a case filed. Another question I'll answer: how much money does it cost? Okay, you're listening, everybody listen, okay? If you have a reputable lawyer and a good law firm, and again, I know some of them, you do not pay any money, and don't pay any money up front. There is none of that shit. It's based on contingency. Every lawyer takes a certain percentage. Usually it's 30%, usually based on the firm and the settlement of whatever money is awarded. So the lawyer will take their cut at the end of the case when they win. So it's called based on contingency. So a dirtbag lawyer will take advantage of you and say, oh, you owe me money. You don't. Hang up. Go find another one. So you don't need to be rich. You don't need to be living in New York State. You don't need to be a perfect model citizen to come forward. You need to want to find justice for the injustice against you. And you have to want closure and be prepared for a roller coaster ride to get there. If that's you, then you should call me.
wow,
Okay,
great.
So, I mean, obviously you have done a lot of work, and you're a little bit above average on like someone who's processed this. I mean, you're a psychologist by nature and actually by trade, right? But
yeah,
all the things you don't have to be, the fact that you do have to have been sexually specifically abused, that seems really unfair to expect people from that sector of abuse to be the ones to stand up publicly in this situation.
Yeah, but you know what? If you look at the Boy Scouts, you look at the Roman Catholic Church, I mean, they're filing bankruptcy. You know, I mean, so many people came forward. Because that's just, it's far reaching than anyone really anticipated. In terms of the troubled teen industry, I think we're paralyzed by fear and not having enough information about what it means. I mean, does it suck? Yeah. Do I wish that I could file, for the injuries physically that I incurred while I was there? Sure. The emotional, mental, spiritual, everything. But no, it's fortunately unfortunate that I fall into that category where I had to be sodomized in order to be able to legally come forward during this year and this point in my life to seek restitution. Boom.
Yeah.
Boom. I know. I'm like booming too. Okay. Have we covered what you want to make sure everyone's aware of on the Child Victims Act specifically?
Yeah. And they can get in touch with me through Facebook or whatever. If they have any more questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm not, and if I don't know the answer, I'll find it. That's really the bottom line.
Yeah.
That is who you are. We believe that. Okay, so then we're going to move on and talk about something else that's really exciting that's coming up.
Liz is participating. No, well, she's participated in so many wonderful things. She's also participating in in an amazing documentary that is coming out called "The Kids Are Not All Right," which is a great name.
Right,
I love
it's true. Yeah,
it's because it's just perfect. The whole title is perfect. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So many people, or probably most, don't realize that for the last about 4 years, I've been filming. The producer, Michaela Schroer, is out of Los Angeles. She is amazing. She won the Peabody Award, I believe it was last year, for Don't Tell Anyone. She did a documentary about being undocumented and the journey to becoming a citizen, telling the story of someone named Angie. So she is not only award-winning, but she's also the most incredible human being that I have ever met. So we'll get that out of the way.
Amazing.
So she really is. And she really took to my story, which collectively is our story in many ways, to tell it. So I was approached very early on, and it was just by a bunch of serendipitous events that we were connected within the week after John died. John Martin Crawford, who committed suicide in August 24th of 2015. She was looking to speak with John, but he had just passed away, and a common colleague that we ended up having said, "I can't get you to John, but I can get you to his best friend." And that's how we connected. I was very leery at first, I think. I wasn't really sure what I was getting myself into, but I felt so lost at that time, and it really saved my life by giving me an opportunity to find a reason to stay, that my story mattered and that I was going to tell it. And so that's how our relationship began. And so throughout the years, she's been filming me in a variety of different aspects, but the film is not just about me, and that's the important part. The film takes an investigative approach to the troubled teen industry, which we know is a $2 billion industry a year. And so it's a very broad stroke across the industry itself. And then there are some survivor stories in different capacities kind of woven through it. And then my experience coming forward after John had died has been documented from the beginning. And she's followed me throughout my process and all the very highs and very lows that I've experienced. If you had told me 25 years ago, like, hang on, Liz, someday this pain is going to be useful, I would have laughed and lost that $1 million bet. And it's helped me in many, many ways kind of come to terms with what happened to me and about the industry and about the importance of our collective voice. And so it's been a very healing journey for me as well. And it's an interesting process when someone starts filming your life. It's not, it's a documentary. And so it's like, it's not Hollywood. It's not like lights, camera, action, go. It's you know, on the fly. It's not scripted in any way. You know, it's kind of just capturing my daily life or the things that I'm doing to advocate for survivors and the things that I've gone through, painful and not so painful. So I'm a part of that, and I'm just one slice of the bigger pizza in terms of the big picture. So I'm excited. I don't have a definitive date for when it will be released. But as soon as I do, I'm sure everyone will know within like 10 seconds of me finding out. But it's going to be, you know, one of the first comprehensive documentaries of its kind, focusing on the troubled teen industry as a whole. So I'm very, very proud to be part of that, and very hopeful that it will inspire others to find their own way to heal, or find their own way to come to, or find closure, you know? And so I'm really, really, the name is The Kids Are Not All Right. And that's exactly, like, it's really holds up to be true that we're not okay.
First of all, is she like an indie producer? She's producing this on her own, or is she backed by a studio?
I don't want to answer incorrectly, but I will just say she is like the baddest boss out there. So she runs her own show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about Michaela from other survivors. I assume that she must have interviewed the Freedom Village kids, because they were
that was
telling
my next question.
How ethical she was. And so I have a question about that too, is because the three of us have had multiple conversations about documenting oral history and storytelling, especially when it's someone's truth. It sounds like everyone in our community is thrilled that Michaela is heading this ship, and we're very, very excited about that. But there's been lots of projects, and like, is there something like a standard of ethics for telling these kind of stories, depending on the motivation?
I mean, that's kind of, I mean, I can give you like my answer. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm not like from that industry, but I believe that, from my experience, if someone is going to tell your story, it should be done compassionately and ethically, and not be exploiting you in any way. You know, there's different genres too, you know, of different platforms. Is it going to be a Netflix? Is it going to be a documentary? Is it going to be a box office film? You know, like, there's all different levels of, you know, a TV docuseries. I mean, there's all these different forms and formats. But I would really encourage any survivor taking part in these programs to, one, have support in place before you start telling your story to strangers. Two, make sure that who you're talking to, get to know them a little bit. Don't be so enamored or starstruck, or, you know, figure out where they're coming from as well. You know, there are many, many, many amazing, ethical, award-winning journalists, and producers and filmmakers and editors out there. You just have to make sure that you're going to run with the right pack of wolves, you know?
Absolutely. In other words, you get 8.
The industry will eat you alive. And depending on the spin or the story, you know, there's, you know, my recommendation is always, I have one, an entertainment lawyer. You know, like, you have to have someone in your corner that's looking over things for you. I have a manager, you know, simply not because I'm cool, just because I'm an idiot. Like, I don't know this industry, you know. So I have someone that manages it for me. Just to make sure that they know my criteria. So that's how they handle my engagements and things like that. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be smart about it, you know, and not fall prey to, the glitz and glamour of, Hollywood, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, totally. Is there a, like, I'm assuming over these past 4 years, it's not just you that's a survivor. I'm sure she's got a lot of survivors that have told their stories from different programs, from different states, from different all different kinds of backgrounds.
Yeah, like I said, it covers the industry across the board, you know, so it's a very comprehensive look at the industry as a whole.
Are you done filming with that now? Like, there's no more.
Okay, so here's the funny part. I don't know, because I keep doing epic shit, and then you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
it just seems like, okay, like to me, like I'm speaking like just from me, like I'll be like, oh, okay, that's it. Okay, that's cool. Like that was great. That's a wrap. And then something else comes up, and then I'm involved in something else. And so, you know, it all depends, you know, and my story has shifted. When I started filming, I had no recourse. And I wasn't very forthcoming about what happened to me, to anyone, until the Child Victims Act finally passed and opened. I had not ever disclosed the truth, other than to the staff of the family that I reported it to. I always downplayed what happened to me out of embarrassment and shame. And also, an interesting fun fact about me, and this is going to sound really douchey, but I don't mean it to be at all. When you're on the cover of the New York Times, it's kind of hard to turn around and say, hey, everybody, they got me though. Like, you know, like they got to me. Like I was sodomized and really abused, and I didn't tell, like I told, but I didn't tell the right people, or it didn't work out the way I wanted. And they got one over on me. You know, it's kind of hard. I felt like I was admitting weakness if I came forward, kind of like when John Martin Crawford committed suicide. It was like, oh my God, like our fearless leader, the face of this campaign, just took his own life a year after the school closed. Like, it was kind of like, how do I possibly break the sad news that not only did I survive and step into the light and everyone saw me in their own way, but then to have to cop to like, but I was sexually assaulted and I've been quiet for 20 something years about it. Dancing around it a little bit, implying it, but never fully coming out with it. I didn't want people to see me as weak or vulnerable, because again, I'm still human. I still have my own shit that I have to deal with. And so, you know, I didn't want to let anybody down. Like I wanted to let them have hope, you know, like Liz can do, if she can get through this, anybody can. And I didn't want to really like disappoint anyone, but I know it sounds twisted, and you would think like, oh my God, Liz is a mental health professional. Like, how could she think so backwards? But again, I'm still human. Well, I hope that makes sense. Like what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
You know?
I think it does.
Yeah, we're humans too, so we get it.
Yeah.
I mean, and speaking of your epic shit, with all humility, and mutual admiration. So when we went to do our first episode, we got this crazy fucking announcement on Facebook from our old friends, the Family Foundation School Truth Campaign. Firstly, who are they? And secondly, telling us that they're ending their campaign, which we want to know what the fuck is up with that as well. Continue.
I think what's happening, you know, is that we've taken inventory of kind of where we're at. Okay, so the Family School Truth Campaign, essentially we're closed because the school's closed, the testimonials are there, like we did our job, and our strategies, you know, the victories and mistakes and all the craziness that went along with it, and the hard work and all the hours logged working on it by a lot of people who helped along the way. You know, when you look at the name, the Family School Truth Campaign, well, the truth is out. Like we know the truth. We've posted the truth. We've written the truth, spoken the truth, gone public with the truth. No one can deny that anyone left there unchanged at this point. Some more than others. And so I think that it's not so much an ending of the campaign, you know, we're just shifting towards a new, you know, and again, there's not going to be a Facebook page up tomorrow, and it's like not like we're going over here now. It's really more of like a mental transition, from it being, you know, instead of the truth campaign, what are we exposing? We did that already. Now it's really, we're turning the table campaign, like we're changing the table topic campaign. and we're, they say, like, if you can't turn the table, flip it the fuck over. And that's kind of what we're doing. And I hope I can say that.
Yes.
Okay,
God,
so
the puns are killing me.
they're
love it.
killer, right?
Yes.
It's like open season.
Loving it.
So, we're really, turning the table campaign is really what it is now, because we have to remember, if we're going to come forward, not only advocating for others, ourselves. I mean, our program is closed. There's a kid somewhere right now wondering, is anybody thinking or worried or coming for me? And we're here. They just don't know it yet. We have to really look at, we already found out the truth and it's out there. Done, deal, sealed. Now what do we do about it?
It no longer needs to be we are survivors and we're telling the truth. I feel like over the last 10 years, it has really become now, here's all
it is our truth.
It is our truth. And we're now going to continue exposing it, and because there are still programs that exist to this very day.
Right. And
people are dying to this very day. We just had another survivor die. So it's like now it's shifted to, we're turning the tables on you and the microscope is on you, and we're not going to let you continue this.
For those coming forward, or who have already, or who will, we've changed positions. We're no longer standing at the end of a horseshoe of tables. We're the ones sitting at the head table, and our abusers and those who are negligent and contributory to that demise are now standing where we once stood, with their hands behind their back facing us. And so that's really, I think the dynamic is changed now. And it's not so much that we have to prove that we're telling the truth. The preponderance of evidence is left for them. They have to prove that we're not. And that's going to be very difficult, because the Family Foundation, the Truth Campaign set precedent for what it looks like to post testimonies and to come forward and to take action and to mail pamphlets and letters and campaigns and all these things. And, we kind of set a template of how it can be done, and we did it. So, that doesn't mean we haven't suffered loss and tragedy throughout it. But, we have to stop being so focused on outing the truth as it is, where are we going to out our truth? And if you were sexually assaulted or sexually abused, and you want to come forward with it, get on that, because you're once that door closes, it's like you're going to leave the family all over again. You're going to leave and never, ever, ever be able to come back and speak your truth once that date closes at midnight on August 14th of 2020. I'll say it again. August 14th of 2020 is the last day it could be filed. So you need to get on the ball, and if you're going to go forward with this, consult with an attorney and find out where you stand. And there's some steps that have to be taken, and then you start moving forward. And it's not a quick turnaround either. And especially now with this coronavirus and all this stuff, the courts are closed here in New York. Mm-hmm. Courts have been suspended. So we're kind of in a freeze right now. And the courts are inundated with bail reform and everything else. So there's even going to be more of a delay in getting things done. So use this time that you have to make a decision if you'd like to come forward or not.
Let everybody know that you're coming back again, and you're doing an AMA, both from a survivor and a professional standpoint.
And a person too. I want like fun questions, like, do you like cats? And I'm gonna be like, yeah, like
include that. Like, no, include the wide spectrum of your ridiculousness of what you will accept.
Anything. Yeah, for the next episode, and again, I want people to have an opportunity to get to know me more than a name on Facebook or just a picture. Like I'm human. And so in doing so, I feel like it's my obligation to be vulnerable and be open. So if people have questions about me, my life, I am semi-private about my personal life and my family, obviously for security and other reasons. Yeah. But if there's something you want to know, like how do I relax, or do I sleep, or what time do I get up, or how do I manage my anxiety, or do I have a therapist, or whatever you want to ask me, that's okay. Like there's no limits. And if I'm uncomfortable answering the question, then I'm just not going to answer it. I mean, that's just, but you can ask like legit questions about the Child Victims Act, or you could also DM me too. And I'll compile all those questions and then I'll answer them whenever the next episode airs. So, if there's something you want to send me or a question you want an answer to, send it to me, and then I'll go through them and I'll answer them on the next episode.
Yeah, and if you want an audio file, send it in. You can always leave us a voice message on our Anchored. It's Anchor.fm/message singular, and you can record super long audio files. So if you want to send her like a 20-minute, we probs won't air that whole thing.
So
but
probably
Liz
what
can
she
have it.
means is that it will be posted where you can ask these questions of me. If you want to go to that link, it's going to be up in the description for this post.
Yeah.
There you go.
It'll be audio, so you can record the audio or you can send in some written to Liz. But,
Yeah.
If you want her to hear your beautiful voice and you want that aired on the podcast, there's that.
Yeah, we'll do like a special 2-hour event, like a premiere party.
We can do it live on Facebook or something so that everybody can come on in, since everyone's at home forever.
Here's a bonus idea. I'll go live on Facebook.
So a name you may have heard a lot in this podcast, and hopefully at least we tried in every single episode of our podcast up until now, is John Martin Crawford. And we're not going to really explain who he is to Liz because we think she did a good job, and please look up everything that she's been doing to represent him and carry the torch forth since his unfortunate and early dismissal from the Dimension 3, and we do hold him responsible for closing the family school. And in part because he went to Congress, not only with our testimonies, but with his own. And so, we really enjoy hearing testimony direct from people. And because John Martin Crawford is such an important part of our experience and obviously very intimately significant to Liz, we do want to let him speak for himself. So please continue to listen. This is John Martin Crawford's testament to Congress. You can watch the entire 2 hours, both from 2007 and 2008. And George Miller is going to introduce him. And this is what he has to say.
John Martin Crawford is a former program participant at the Family Foundation School, where he spent almost 2 years as a teenager. John is currently working towards a double master's in English and secondary education, and is also working with the Community Alliance for Ethical Treatment of Youth, hoping to shed light on the troubled teen industry.
First, I would like to thank the chairman and the committee for the opportunity to present my side of this story. After watching the hearing back in October, I was truly inspired by the clear case of morality that brought together both sides of the aisle on this discussion. We've been called noisy complainers, and we've been called manipulating troublemakers, but after 10 years, I finally have my chance to speak. My name's John Martin Crawford, and I was locked up in the NATSAP-affiliated program, the Family Foundation School in Hancock, New York, from 95 to 97. My life at home was anything but stable, causing me to seek my own release from it all. I created a persona for myself, the troublemaker at school, always looking for attention I didn't get at home. I was involved in drugs by the age of 13. I was lost, constantly in fights, legal run-ins, and more. My parents were at wit's end. My only release was my music, my writing, and my skateboarding. After being expelled from public school and one private school for marijuana use and writing an underground newspaper, my parents were told to send me to the family shortly thereafter, thinking it would give me what I needed. Once I arrived at the family, I knew I was there until I was 18. I went through what seems like the ritualistic stripping of identity almost all of us survivors faced. I was stripped, my clothes were taken and thrown away, my music, my art, my skateboard, all destroyed. What I didn't have with me, my parents were told to destroy as well. I was left with only a letter from my mother for the next 3 months. I'd been to some inpatient settings before, but this one was different. Other places allowed phone calls, mail, peer communication. Here I wasn't even allowed to call home the first few months. Even after that, I only got one phone call home a week, nothing more, no access to CPS. Here I was only allowed to talk to staff and kids that had been there more than 6 months. I was told I was denying the extent of my drug use, and I was confused as to just how I would get better enough to see my family. I sat, watched, and learned to play the game of lies necessary to get privileges and eventually get out. I was lucky and figured these rules out quickly enough not to endure what I saw many kids endure, but I witnessed it all, including staff punching students in the face while restraining, not once, but several times. Typical restraint procedures were wrapping kids up in duct tape and blankets. Kids were not let out of this wrap, even to use the bathroom, for feminine hygiene, or just to move around a little bit and extend their limbs. Restraints were not only done by faculty, but students as well. Usually this was even more brutal and was often done in front of all other students to show what will happen if you act out. Kids were forced to eat food they were allergic to and keep eating even if vomiting as a result. We were forced to attend daily religious services and AA meetings and share personal stories with the outside world. Kids as young as 12 being taken out of school to carry out pointless manual labor, such as shovel manure, carry wheelbarrows of rocks, sweeping the roof, shoveling, numerous things for days on end. When kids tried to run away, it was again not only staff but students told to chase, tackle, restrain, and bring them back. Many things were heard from staff, berating kids with high levels of verbal abuse, often of a highly derogatory and sexual nature, at times regarding sexual orientation. An admitted sex addict was one of the high-up faculty and counselors, as well as a dorm monitor living above the boys' dorm. The rules I learned to avoid many of these problems were as follows. I made up a horrible past to cure myself of. Our moral inventory was nearly always fabricated to make our problems seem worse and the program seem like salvation. Tell on yourself and your peers for things that you may have never done to give the illusion that you're getting better and working the program. If you have certain gifts, you can find a way to skate by. For me, I was their golden boy with my pen, and at my graduation speech, as well as for others, our speeches were used as propaganda as part of the family day for all the parents to hear their message of goodwill. Under no circumstances were we to tell our parents or prospective parents the truth about what we saw. I was fortunate enough to go home after a while, but I quickly learned that if I told my parents the truth about what I saw, I would only be explained as a manipulation and lose more privileges. While I had been fortunate enough to miss out on these horrors personally, I gave many tours to prospective parents, always omitting the details of restraints, punishments, and any lack of communication against the abuses that took place. As a dorm leader, I was told to wake up one of the kids in my dorm with the lamp that only had a floodlight as a bulb, burning his retinas. I participated in the restraining and took part in the barrage of verbal attacks just as did many of my peers. I am not proud of this, but we had no choice. If we did not conform, we were being negative and subjected to the same treatment and lack of privileges as everyone else. Once I left, I saw that I was now in the real world with real problems again, and the school had never helped me with those problems. After nightmares of the family led to a relapse, I was soon out of Vassar College and into the military. The training in the military, although viewed by some to be harsh, was a cakewalk compared to the hell endured at the family school. My trust issues were never resolved after leaving the family, and the nightmares remained. Ultimately, these psychological issues and flashbacks led to the need for my discharge from the Army, something I regret to this day. For years, I thought all this was my fault. While the nightmares and anxiety never wore off, getting high at least made it go away again. I will not blame others for my choices or my mistakes. I take responsibility for those. What I blame the family for is stripping me of my childhood. I still have nightmares of being locked up and told I'm ruining my life. I still read their monthly paper of lies and get nauseous remembering what we witnessed. The only thing I can say to temper my disdain for these types of schools, or at least for the family, is this. While the programs, as they are, have little positive effect long term, I do believe that kids in my position need some sort of help. I believe there can be a safe solution, as some staff are genuinely decent and caring people. We need oversight and regulation of these facilities with swift and severe penalties for those who stray from the standards. What must be remembered through all of this is that these success stories that these places put out tend to fall in the 1 to 2 year range after leaving such program and are usually the opinions of parents. A true statistic, of the 25 kids from my graduation class and the one prior to mine, maybe 4 remain sober. While many can now say they lived successful lives, it came anywhere between 5 and 10 years after leaving the program and figuring out life on their own with psychiatric help. Unfortunately, this cannot be said for all. The programs are quick to take credit for a successful story and are just as fast to claim that anyone that doesn't make it just didn't work the program. The truth, the nightmares and psychological scars of being dragged from your home to a place in the middle of nowhere, restrained in blankets and duct tape, assaulted verbally and physically, those scars and that trauma never go away. For my friends who have since died from suicide because of the nightmares, or those who still suffer the nightmares, our time and our voice will not be in vain. There comes a time for every man to make amends and right their wrongs. This is a lesson all these programs preach, and it's a lesson they should now follow. We need oversight and regulation of these facilities with swift and severe penalties for those who stray from the standard. These success stories that these places put out tend to fall in the 1 to 2 year range after leaving such program and are usually the opinions of parents. A true statistic, of the 25 kids from my graduation class, maybe 4 remain sober. While many can now say they live successful lives, it came anywhere between 5 and 10 years after leaving the program and figuring out life on their own with psychiatric help. Unfortunately, this cannot be said for all. The programs are quick to take credit for a successful story and are just as fast to claim that anyone that doesn't make it didn't work the program. The truth? The nightmares and psychological scars of being dragged from your home to a place in the middle of nowhere, restrained in blankets and duct tape, assaulted verbally and physically, those scars and that trauma never go away. For my friends who have since died from suicide because of the nightmares, or those who still suffer the nightmares, our time and our voice will not be in vain. There comes a time for every man to make amends and right their wrongs. This is a lesson all these programs preach, and it's a lesson they should now follow.